My name is Boni Odoemene. I am the Chief Communications Officer and co-founder of Black and Irish. Basically, Black and Irish is an organisation that was founded on the 3rd of June 2020 following the tragic death of George Floyd. We began as an Instagram page dedicated to highlighting the struggles and successes from within the Isle of Ireland's Black and mixed race community. We did this by sharing stories, real stories from real people. And from there, interest and determination to understand the Black Irish experience, combat racism, and support the good work that we do began to grow and grow. In just under 1 year, Black and Irish became Ireland's largest Black empowerment page on Instagram and Facebook. With a team of 16 Black and mixed race Irish volunteers, we have shared up to 300 stories, launched over 10 campaigns, been invited to over 40 speaking engagements, and are currently raising €20,000 for an Irish migrants' rights charity. And just to add the cherry on the top, our national podcast, the Black and Irish podcast, became one of Ireland's top 25 podcasts only last month. So with all that said, we are absolutely delighted to be invited to participate in this year's West Belfast Festival. So as you can see, we have 4 amazing Irish people on our panel today. Before I give them the opportunity to properly introduce themselves, I just want to give you guys their names and then I'll just pass it on to them before we kick off this unreal conversation. So first we have Maureen Hamblin, we have Kenny Olaniyi, Angela O'Shaughnessy, and Ope Oworu. So guys, honestly, thank you so much for joining us today. I personally cannot wait to really kick off this discussion itself. Do you know what? Before we actually probably get going, how about we just start with introductions from each of you? Maureen, do you want to go first yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Maureen. Maureen Hamblin. I literally just moved to Carrickfergus, but I was living in East Belfast. But I spent most of my life in Dublin, originally from Kenya. I moved when I was 11 years old. And I'm a mother of 3. I had a baby 6 weeks ago. So if there's any baby stuff on me, you know why. But I'm just delighted to be a part of this festival. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, Maureen. Really appreciate it. Next, Kenny, do you want to go yourself?
Yes, thanks, Bonnie. Hi, guys. Great to sort of be on be at the festival and be able to sort of have this discussion. My name is Kenny. I actually work closely with Bonnie as part of Black and Irish. I'm the Ents coordinator. As well as that, I actually live up in Belfast as well. I moved up a couple of months ago now because for work. So Belfast has welcomed me in. And I used to live in Dublin. I lived in Dublin pretty much all my life after moving to Ireland from Nigeria when I was about 4 years old. As well as that, I also have my own podcast called Pints of Malt with a bunch of my mates who sort of have similar backgrounds to me, where we really talk about everything growing up in Ireland and that like duality of being Black and Irish and Nigerian and Irish as well. And as well as that, I also run a Slight Motif with a bunch of my friends as well, which is an online platform promoting urban culture in Ireland as well. So yeah, that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Unreal stuff. Cheers for coming through today, Kenny. Angela, you're up next. What's the story?
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. My name's Angela O'Shaughnessy. I'm a writer, storyteller, and communications strategist. You can hear the California girl accent because I grew up between San Francisco and Donegal. So that's where the Irish connection comes from. I'm also a former Image magazine contributor and have spoken on radio and RTE and News Talk. And I actually interviewed the folks at Black and Irish for a piece a few months ago. So very happy to be here.
Unreal stuff, Angela. Love it. And last but not least, Ope, what's the story, man?
Hi, Bunny. Thanks. Thanks for that. Hi. So my name is Ope Oworu, and I'm originally from Galway, but I work in Dublin as well. But because of COVID, I've had to move back home. But I'm a mortgage broker for one of the banks in the retail services. But as well as that, I also have my own podcast with my mates called the Ohman podcast. Similar to Kenny and Boni with the Black and Irish podcast, we kind of talk about our experiences growing up here in Ireland, what it means to be both either either Black and Irish or Nigerian and Irish, and what that means, different encounters and sharing people's stories. And we've recently just launched a different branch called Signal Events, where we want to be more active within our community and give back to the community and kind of share that positive light, especially after the year that we've had with the COVID. So, very delighted to be here and be a part of this discussion. So I'm looking forward to it.
Unreal stuff, Opie. So before we actually kick off, I don't know why I didn't get the message, but it's All Black Thursdays, guys. So with that said, right, I'm going to join the gang because sure, look, it's just one thing I noticed really quick, and I was like, you know what, I might as well be part of the gang here when I'm doing this, which is all right.
They're going to think that we're organizing some militant uprising.
Oh, shh, don't say anything. No. Right, everyone. So today's discussion, so what I've done is that I've broken it down according to 3 sections, basically. So I want to look at maybe our experiences growing up Black in Ireland, what the Black Irish identity is, and our future as an island and as a community moving forward, you know yourself. So as I did say to you guys before we kicked off, that please do not see me as a moderator or anything. Just see me as a facilitator of conversation, because why not, you know yourselves. So I'm just going to ask an open question. I'll probably address it to somebody and we'll just answer from there and we'll just kick off. So experiences. One thing that's quite interesting that I've noticed, and I picked it up when everybody were giving their introductions, is that we all grew up in different parts of the island itself. And with that, even though there is a similarity that we do share as being Black people, there is differences that come in regards to proximity and geography. So the first question I just have for you all is, what was it like growing up in Ireland? I'd probably throw that first to Kenny. Go on.
What was life growing up in Ireland? It was, on the whole, for me, it was good. I enjoyed my experience growing up in Ireland. I suppose I grew up in Carlow. I was in Carlow for 2 years when we first moved here, and then I moved to Dublin, and I was in Blanchardstown that I did like most of primary school and secondary school, and then I moved to Balbriggan, and I enjoyed it. I always sort of got on well with people, got on well with everybody. I was a good kid in school. I always, like, being from an African household, you kind of have to be a good kid in school. Kind of thing. So I wouldn't say I was a problem child and stuff. So it was for me, it was a good experience. It wasn't until I got to sort of, I didn't really know anything about like sort of like Blackness or like understand what like being Black or being in Ireland meant or anything like that until I got a bit older, when I got into secondary school and I moved to Balbriggan, which has a huge Black demographic, and that's where I met all my friends who are like my lifelong friends now, and that's when I started to see the differences in like how people behave, or how like suppose the youth behave. Sorry?
The interactions between.
Yeah, exactly. The interaction, exactly. So like when I was in my old schools, I was probably the only black kid in the school, black kid in the class, or one of two of us anyway. And it was fine. Like, I didn't know any different really. But then when I moved to Balbriggan, there was a lot more Black people and a lot more and even in secondary school in Blanche, there was a lot more Black people. So it was a bit more you're a bit more comfortable in that space. I remember like our experiences in school where there were certain things that like people did, or like I was picked on in a way, and like I didn't understand why. And then going back, you're thinking maybe it was because maybe it's the thing of like being bullied in school, just like as a normal kid, everybody gets it, or maybe it's because, okay, maybe I was a bit different. So there was a bit of that as well. So I think I got a lot more comfortable within myself and within sort of my community when I finally moved to Balbriggan, and like I was able to sort of hang out with my friends, and we go out a bit more, be a bit more, socialize a bit more, like go to youth clubs with the lads and all that kind of stuff. So I think for me overall, it was a good experience. There was a few things looking back that I was like, yeah, that wasn't on or at all, and like I don't know why I was picked on for that for any reason, you know. And especially back in primary school, there was one occasion where this kid just didn't like me, and didn't like me or my sister, and it wasn't a case of didn't like me because like there was more to it. But when you're young like that, you don't really understand or realize it. But then when you get older, you look back and you're like, yeah, actually that wasn't on at all. Like his mom, I remember one time his mom they drove past me and my sister and literally just yelled at us for no reason whatsoever. And if you ask my mom or ask anybody, you'd be like, there would be no reason to yell at them again and damn me. Like they don't do anything. They just go to school and come back home, you know? So stuff like that, you think about, yeah, it's a bit sad that you didn't sort of, maybe in a way it's good that it didn't really affect me much. I didn't really understand it or deep it. But looking back, it was like, yeah, there was overall good experience for me, and like really, especially once I got a bit older and sort of I was interacting with more Black people. That's when the experience really became, for me, a great experience anyway. Yeah.
And yourself, Maureen, I hope I'm not incorrectly saying this, but you grew up in Dublin, right?
Yeah, in Tala.
No, I'm from Tala.
I tear up, actually. It's funny, and it could be all the hormones, but yeah, just like I have to say that my teachers were perhaps my friends. So I moved kind of, when I was transitioning from primary school to secondary school. So I didn't finish primary school in Kenya, and I didn't do primary school in Ireland. I went straight into secondary school and put my head down, was studying, got all A's for my Christmas exams. And that's when I started to notice people being like, oh, we thought you couldn't speak English. And just, just subtle things like that in the class. But on the bus, on the way to school or on the way home, it was just horrific. Like people would try and set my braids on fire. I'd get called the effing N-word a lot, like probably every day. And then just horrific stuff. One time I had this wee kid pee on my leg on the bus, on the 7 to 7 bus. And then just stuff like that every day was just traumatic. And it got really bad when we moved to West Tala, and just the neighbors on quite a few of the neighbors did not like having a second Black family on the road. So they were okay with the first family. I guess because they did really, I don't know, I'm not sure why, but when we moved in, it was just horrific. All these boys, I laugh now, but it was traumatic, just peeing in our garden, calling us the N-word, go back to your country. And then we had our window broken. Like it just got really unsafe, like to a point where I started carrying a knife. Because I thought, and now when I look back, like the knife was blunt as hell, like it wouldn't have hurt anyone, but I thought if they came up to me, then I could just be like, I have a knife, get away from me. Because I had an experience, a close relative of mine got surrounded by a group of Irish guys, all white, and they touched her inappropriately while she was walking from the bus stop in our estate. So stuff like that happened. But I have to say, like, I had great teachers. Miss Emer O'Connor was just a tremendous teacher, got me singing. got me and my sisters and my cousins to sing at the National Concert Hall, stuff like that. So I have some great highlights, but I couldn't wait to get out of Tala for me, because I was just like, I need to get out. Because it was kind of traumatic every single day. But I had a bit of a naivety to myself as well. And I think that kept me from hating white people, because so the naivety as well. And also I'm quite a strong Christian. So that kept me to know and helped me realize that it's not everyone that's like that. So much so that I ended up marrying a white guy. And I remember telling a friend of mine all the stuff that happened to me. And she was like, and you married a white guy? I guess it didn't destroy me. It was traumatic. There are things that I'm still working through right now in my 30s that happened when I was, in my teens. But yeah, it was traumatic, but I do have some good highlights as well.
That's actually quite interesting, Maureen, because I also grew up in Tala. I grew up across South Dublin, but predominantly I spent my teenage years in Tala. And it's interesting, some of the memories you've actually brought back for me, because the first time I was called the N-word was in Tala. We had bricks smashed through our doors. We had graffiti on the side of our walls and stuff like that. But then I just hid out of the back of my head the older I got, just so I wouldn't have to deal with the trauma. So it's quite interesting how your story has brought back some of my own personal stories. But what I'm quite interested to hear as well from Angela and from Opie is the experiences you guys had outside of Dublin. Because I know Kenny touched on how there are some differences, of Black people depending where you go across the island itself. But Opie, you grew up in Galway yourself. What was that like? And from you now living in Dublin, do you see any differences in the Black experience?
Yeah. So funny enough, I did primary school in Dublin, and my parents moved to Galway after 6th class. So I did secondary school and university here in Galway. And one thing I can definitely say is my experience was mixed. Not similar to Maureen. Like I would have had some instances as well, because I remember one time I was walking to school and a group of lads, either they didn't go to school or they just never went. And for a good few months, we get chased by dogs every morning on the way to school. So I'd be coming in drenched in sweat just because they let their dogs off on us and we'd have to run. So I remember that growing up, but similar, I actually didn't process it until you were saying it. And I was just remembering, oh, wow, I actually had a similar experience. And I remember a scenario as well. My dad's car got stolen in front of our house. And they found it. We lived in Lucan, and they found it in another estate, burnt to the ground. So, yeah, we'd had instances like that. But then, like you said, there was a contrast when we moved to Galway. It was actually much more quieter, which was funny because growing up, there wasn't a huge amount of the Black demographic in Galway at that time. In secondary school, there was only 2 of us in our whole year. There was three Black people in my year. In first year, I remember. And obviously it got better as the years went on. But till today, me and my other friend were still good mates just because of the experiences that we had. But it was mixed in the sense, I've always played sports. So I was able to integrate easier through sports, through team sports, through different bonding sessions that, the color isn't seen. So I was lucky in a way, in the sense I didn't experience that much in secondary school because I was either with the football team or the hurling team or the Gaelic team. But eventually I had to choose one sport. But growing up in Galway, and the difference I would notice between Galway and Dublin is Galway is a little bit more cultural anyways. Galway is like a very cultural city.
It got cultural capital, didn't it, at one point?
At one point, yeah. Before COVID, we used to have the Galway Arts Festival every year, which is a big deal. We had the Volvo Ocean Race. So culturally, Galway has kind of been more accepting in terms of other demographics. Every summer, there's an influx of Spanish students that are normally in Galway that learn English, and different from different nationals as well. So I would say my experience in going in the West Side has been much more accepting than it would have been in Dublin, because even kind of going back then, so I did secondary school, university, and a little bit of work experience here. One thing is Galway, when you now get into the working space, there's not as much opportunities as there might be in Dublin. So when I moved then back to Dublin, in the working space, I saw a different side to living in Ireland, let's say, and which I thought, well, it's Dublin, you kind of get used to it. But then as you get older, you're like, no, that's not right. That shouldn't be that way. And I would say my experience has been mixed. I can't say it's been a bad experience. For me overall, it's been a good experience. But yeah, you would have instances where you'd have to either defend yourself or you'd have to. I'm sorry, Maureen, that you had to carry a knife around, but I remember now there was an instance where a knife was wielded in my face, actually, just because of the color of my skin. But for some reason, that didn't make me kind of think, oh, I have to kind of take it on myself to equip myself. So it never got that serious, but I would have had instances. But overall, it was a relatively good experience growing up.
Right. And Angela, for yourself, you have an interesting perspective because you're traveling back and forth between the United States and Ireland. What was that like for yourself? And was there anything in particular you noticed growing up?
Yeah, I mean, Donegal, I don't know if any of you folks have been out there, but, it's kind of dubbed the Forgotten County. I still consider it home, and it's my favorite place, I think, in the world. But I was the only Black person that most of my peers, friends, everyone in my town and the surrounding towns had ever seen in person. And this was in the mid-90s. And so there were no people of color, aside from my mom, who was a dark-skinned Black woman, and my dad, who was white. We were the only mixed race family around that we knew of. And people gave me a really hard time. I was taunted on a daily basis, and it never got physical. I never felt physically threatened, but I did develop severe social anxiety from a very young age by the time I was 8 or 9, and a fear of being seen precisely because I was constantly being gawked at, stared at, pointed at, made fun of, and always othered and hypersexualized and exoticized. And all I wanted to do was to just fade into anonymity. And it was impossible precisely because of the color of my skin. And I had bright red hair as a child. You could see a little bit of the red. Now it's gotten a lot darker, but I looked, really different. And people couldn't figure out, it's like, she's Black, but why is her hair red? And why is her skin so light? And her mom's so dark. And, just these like really, really very basic things that were blowing people's minds. And it's like, this is my life. This is who I am. Why don't you just let me live? And it felt impossible to really be comfortable. I'm grateful that I had a close-knit group of friends who were all white Irish and a bit older than me. And so I had a group of local girls who would always defend me and would always stick up for me anytime someone had something nasty to say. And, to their credit, it really helped me, I think, manage living in rural Donegal.
It's especially since last summer, where I feel a lot of Black people around the world have had to reflect on past experiences. It's really taught me how, like in situations like this where I'm literally talking to other people about similar experiences that we've all shared, if unintentionally forces me to remember other memories that my psyche have literally put away, But the funny thing I've noticed, and I don't know if any of you all have ever noticed this, well, all types of experiences, but for me, it also allows me to also remember, the good people I've came across in my life,
Yeah.
There was a moment when I was 19, and I started like looking more into like different types of literature around race and stuff. And you know, when you fall down that rabbit hole of just anger, and you can feel it growing and growing. It took literally me forcing myself to remember like the good teachers, the good football mates, you know, the people like one of my sister, one of her godmother is a white Irish woman who was always there for us, like a proper ride or die. It took me forcing myself to remember just the majority who are good people to prevent me falling down that dark rabbit hole, which is very enticing. I don't know if you guys ever
you saying that, just kind of I remember during university as well. So like I explained, during secondary school, because of I was playing sports, I was kind of more with my white friends, let's say. I'd more be integrated with them. The minute I got into university and I saw my black friends, I kind of moved towards them more. So I'd spend all my time more. And the more time I spent with them, the more I started having that kind of not hatred, but like a deep resentment because of the shared experiences that we would all share and stuff. So it took, like yourself, it took me a while to kind of grow out of that mindset to be like, no, not everybody is like that. Like, and to have the good people there, because similar to yourself, I did have friends that would have stuck up for me in the past. The time that a knife was wielded in my face was actually one of my white friends that kind of stepped in and intervened. So yeah, you kind of can go into a rabbit hole when you kind of, if you're constantly remembering those experiences, it can grow into resentment and cloud actual judgment for people, and then you kind of box everyone in the same box together, which in reality that's not how life works. So I completely understand, completely.
Yeah, and I think no, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't talk about the stuff that happened to me on the bus, or you know, like the stuff that happened to me. I didn't talk about it at home. So, or if I did, it was just kind of like, and I guess my mom and my stepdad didn't know how to deal with that. So it was kind of like, oh, well, you know, you just put your head down. There's a reason why we came to this country. And, you know, so, so you were just like, okay, I'll study hard, you know. And so I didn't talk about it for years and years and years. And when I got to university, actually, most of my friends were white. And then, you know, I got married to Tim a few years after, and he's from Northern Ireland. And I think for me, the straw that broke the camel's back, took about nearly 20 years to break me, was his family being racist. Because I think in my head, I could always forgive the people out there, the people on the bus, the people wherever. Like, I could always be like, you know, whatever, I'm not living with them, I don't have to see them, fine, whatever. But when it came so close to home and one of his relatives started saying that Black people couldn't rule themselves and we needed white people to rule us, and that Black people are the cause of all the problems in the UK and Ireland, and, you know, all that stuff, that got to me. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, maybe I do need help. Maybe I need counseling. Maybe I need to talk about this stuff. But it took the experience being close to home for me to kind of be like, to stop being naive and to acknowledge the evil that is racism. You know, when a relative sees your baby who is both Black and white, and they say, oh, that baby looks too Kenyan or too Black, and, you know, what's their hair gonna look like? And, you know, that was the thing that broke me. And I went through a few years of just, you know, we were in America at the time, and we've moved a bit. So we were in Michigan, all the shootings were happening. And then I'm having to deal with these relatives who are coming over to visit for like 5-6 weeks. And I'm having to listen to them. And then Black men are being shot. So I had to come to a point where I had to remember the people who are kind to me, the people who are still being kind to me, and my husband, who is sometimes more Black than even myself, and who embraced me and my Afro and everything about me when other men, even Black men, did not want me with my own hair. So it's taken the experience coming so close to home for me to be like, oh wait. But I'm dealing with it. I've gotten help, and I think Black people need to realize that you need to talk about these things at home. So my sons, the eldest is 5, the youngest is 6 weeks, and the 5-year-old knows that the world is just going to see him as Black rather than both Black and white. And we've had the talk. He was born in America. If he ever goes to America, we've had the talk about the police and all of that. So I think we need to talk about these things at home to stop the build-up from happening.
I agree.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think it's one thing about talking that I suppose podcasting helps in a way, and especially with the boys, when we started off because we just used to chat in college, just chat a lot of rubbish. And last year when we started when the whole sort of around this time, especially when the whole George Floyd thing happened, we had an episode when we were really frank about. Usually we're very lighthearted about our experiences, but we were really frank about stuff. And it was then for me when I look back to sort of having that group of friends in secondary school and in college, that I was able to sort of really be thankful for having those people that had shared experiences. So that way it's not sometimes even though we talk about it, we don't even necessarily need to talk about it. We can give each other a look or tell a story, and it feels like we can relate to each other. And I think that for me is a very comforting thing, to have people to be able to relate to, people to be able to, if you're feeling upset. There was a time when especially even around the whole end, when the NSARS thing happened and stuff like that, the whole week, we were upset, super upset. And my girlfriend, she's white, and she understood it but didn't understand it. But then when I was able to say to the lads, everybody was feeling the same way, and everybody online was feeling the same way. Everybody that I know was feeling the same way about that. And I think that, and it's for me, that gave me a bit of strength, and it gives me a bit of we're in this together. You
didn't feel alone.
Exactly. We're all trying, we all understand what the problem is. We all understand where we're coming from and what we're doing, and we're all sort of banding together. And I think that for a lot of Black people is something that, especially in Ireland, it's something that you never, because if you're living if you're in a school that's predominantly white, sometimes you can feel like you're alone. But if you have more of your Black friends around you, you feel a lot more empowered, you feel a lot more comfortable. I was able to come out of my shell a lot more when I moved to Barbarian and be around more Black people, because I was just able to sort of still hang out with my white friends and still get all the jokes, get all the sort of understand the Irish history.
Well, you don't feel like you're representing all Black people.
Exactly, no, because it's just me and my boys chilling, and it's just me and my boys hanging out and understanding each other, and we don't necessarily need to sort of explain stuff. Oh, this is why I can't do that, or this is why I don't want to do that, or this is why I can't go there. It's because I'm Black. But to a white person, sometimes they don't understand that. But to a Black person, they say that, cool, it's cap, So I think those things really do help your just everyday life become a lot easier sometimes.
I feel like, as the 5 of us here, four of us. I can't even count. I did ordinary maths in secondary school, so you have to allow me. You have to allow me for a bit. But I do feel that, especially for Black people, because of our shared history, it seems like our experiences that we deal with, despite what generation we are of, it's like our shared experiences is both a burden but also a comfort. It's quite weird, isn't it, Angela?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I was in Brooklyn last year when obviously the pandemic broke out. We had the highest rate of infection, I think, in the country. We were the epicenter of the pandemic at the time. And then when George Floyd was killed, all of these mass protests started happening. It was absolutely terrifying. And I was like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going back to Ireland. And it's funny. It's like, go flee to the absolute whitest place that you know. But that's where I felt safe. You know, I knew I could go back. Yeah. And I knew it. There's a familiarity and also just like a safety thing. It's weird because even though I've dealt with so many microaggressions and subtle forms of racism from Irish people in Donegal, it's a weird dynamic because I also don't feel like I'm going to be shot by the police, or I don't feel like there's the racism functions a little bit differently. And it was also, my time last year, I had a brilliant time, and the pandemic was rough for a lot of people and obviously really tragic for some, but I was able to build this amazing community of my own, of mixed race people who could talk about their shared experiences. And that was the first time in my life at 30, that I was actually meeting other people, other Black, mixed race, Black Irish people who had shared experiences. And so, I mean, I think it's also important to not to discount the fact that Black people are not a monolith. I mean, we have shared experiences that are universal just because of anti-Black racism that is everywhere. But it was a really interesting time to reflect. A lot of, you know, my friends from childhood, I can't still talk to about racism in detail. You know, you'll hear people say, oh God, you know, that was terrible. Oh, there's so much hate in the world. But even if people are your friends, I've been noticing how there's still this struggle, this challenge, and there's this resistance amongst a lot of, I think, broader white Irish society to actually really understand and empathize with the Black experience and to recognize how racism functions in the most insidious and the more subtle ways. I mean, even simple things like being followed by the police, having to make calculations about how am I going to wear my hair for this meeting? Am I going to look presentable? You know, am I going to be followed in Tesco again? Like, racial profiling is a concept that a lot of white Irish people I know don't even know about. And so, yeah, all that to say, a lot came up last year. A lot of good came up last year. And I was so happy to see these types of conversations happening amongst broader Irish society. I think that it's like slowly but surely, we're getting there.
Fingers crossed. So I'm conscious that we have about 20 minutes left. So I do want to get to the second section of our discussion. But I really want to just say before we move on that for anyone that is watching our discussion here and may have a bit, you know, question marks as to some of the experiences that we are sharing, or is this really the Ireland that I live in? Because you get this response in different ways whenever you talk about racism on the island. I have found. All I can say is that just listen to the stories that different people of color and Black people are saying, because stories of being chased by dogs, getting cars turned on fire, being followed in shops. This is not America we're talking about. This is the Isle of Ireland in the 21st century and the 90s. So as we move on, I want to look at maybe identity, which is quite interesting because this is such a nuanced area itself. So I'm just going to throw this question out to all of us and we'll just take it as it is, you know. If someone was to ask you, what is the Black Irish identity, or what does it mean to be Black and Irish, what would you say?
Can I go first?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd say it's a little bit the best of both worlds. Now, best of both worlds in the sense, I know where I'm coming from in terms of my heritage, my parents' heritage, where my descendants are from, let's say, and also in the country that I've grown up in, as in I've integrated myself in, like I've had the Irish experience, you know, your chicken fillet rolls, balls or going down to Croke Park with the boys or playing hurling or GAA. Like, I've had that experience. So for me, when it comes to identity, because I that's something I struggled with growing up as well. It's like, where do I fit in? Am I more Black? Am I more Irish? Am I in the middle? What am I? And for me, it's kind of like, it's being able to kind of differentiate the setting that you're in. So for instance, when you're in church, I don't know, Boni and Kenny, if you guys will testify, if you see someone older, you bend down and you have to say good evening, ma, or you have to code switch or change the.
That's in Yoruba culture. In Igbo culture, we don't do that. We don't bend down, but we greet. Yeah.
Like the greeting would be okay, fair enough, but like the greeting would be more of like, would you call like people that you don't know like auntie and uncle?
Yeah, literally.
Anyway, that's more of a heritage thing. That's culture. When someone's older than you call them auntie and uncle, but in the Irish culture, you call them by their name. And that's something you learn as you're growing up. So it's more like, for me, it's having the best of both worlds and being able to code switch in the sense, okay, if I'm with my Black friends or my Nigerian friends, I speak in my Nigerian accent. If I'm with my Irish friends, I speak in my Irish accent. But as I've grown older, whoever knows me I'll speak how I speak. So for me, I think it's having the best of both worlds when you talk about being Black and Irish.
Just to literally follow on what you're saying, it's exactly that. A couple of years ago, I sort of realized that it's great to have both, really. For me, I love it. The fact that the way I see it is that when I was in school, I used to be in school, learn all about Irish history, learn Irish, all this kind of stuff, play football, play with the lads, all this kind of stuff, be cool, grand. And then when I go home and I go into the gates, I'm all about, it's back to, okay, speaking to my mom in the mother language, or sort of eating the food that like my mom would make and stuff like that, and having that best of both worlds. For me, it's the best thing, and it's something that I've realized that like, it makes me unique, it makes me stand out, and makes the Black and Irish people stand out. And it, like, the thing of code switching, of being able to switch up at any given time in any given situation, even within a conversation. If you ever listen to the pod, you'll see that we switch up from 0 to 100. We sometimes have a bit of an American accent, some UK accent, a lot of influences, all this kind of thing. And that whole sort of melting pot. And then obviously the age that we're growing up in, where everything's sort of digital and you can sort of experience everything from all around the world and understand all these sort of different jokes, different memes, different people, and all that, and then roll it into one and sort of, for me, it's brilliant, and I love it. And I think it's what makes me really proud to be both Nigerian, both Irish, but an African man and a Black man. Like, literally everything in my identity, I'm very happy about, and I'm very like proud of it. I'm very sort of like, I can say that if I'm ever abroad, I can say that, yeah, I'm from Ireland. Yeah, I'm also from Nigeria. I'm proud to say that, So I think it's that whole sort of blending of sort of cultures, experiences, people,
intersecting identities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that uniqueness that I think it's only Black Irish people can sort of attest.
Yeah. And like I said before, that Blackness is not a monolith, but I think that everyone experiences, even though we have shared experiences, our experiences, depending on our family, the culture we come from, the place that we grow up, it varies. And so looking at those intersecting identities, I think, is really cool. As a mixed person, if like someone's like, what does it mean to be Black and Irish? I'm like, ask Phil Lynott, Kevin Sharkey. I mean, Phil Lynott, he's dead. But, Paul McGrath, Ruth Nega, Emma DeBeery, even Samantha Mumba, or Barack Obama. Like, there are all these folks who are Black and Irish who are generations older than us. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's not the newest thing, even though it's still relatively new. Like, we've been around. And I think that the one point I wanted to make is that, like, how I answer the question is it is not so much about me seeking affirmation from white people or white Irish people anymore. Like, I'm Irish. I took Irish in school. I did Irish dancing for many years. Like, I don't need to prove to you anything anymore. And I feel like that's a really, really, really nice place to be in.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I come to understand that your identity affects your perspective, and in return affects your purpose. So identity for me has been a big thing, not even when it comes to being Black and Irish, just in general as a person. Who am I? What do I stand for? What are my core beliefs, my core values? Like, who am I? And I think for me, the being in Michigan for 3.5 years really kind of brought this question up, because both Tim and I would say, oh, well, we came from Ireland, and white Americans were quick to say, yeah, Tim's from Ireland, but where's Maureen from? So and really, then I was just like, oh, wait, yeah, I'm from Kenya as well. And initially I was offended. I was sad, because I was like, what do they know about me? But like you said, Angela, it's coming to a point where you know who you are, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I don't need a white person to say, yeah, well, you're very Irish. And I know my accent changes a lot as well. So that's another big thing where people are like, well, what is your accent? But I know that I've given most of my life to Dublin and to Ireland, and now Northern Ireland, and that's a piece of me that nobody can take away. I've contributed culturally. I've sang in Irish. I've education-wise, I've been very Irish. I've played sports. I've just been Irish. I've represented Ireland well. From where I was coming from, but I've also represented Kenya and Blackness and who I was born, the culture I was born in, and nobody can take that away either. So it's like, I guess, a third culture between Kenya and Ireland that have come and been born in me, and my children are getting it as well, but they're also probably going to create their own third culture as well, and I shouldn't force them to be anything that they're not. And so for me, identity, perspective, purpose, who I am then is going to affect how I treat Ireland and Northern Ireland, how I treat people I come across, and how I relate to everyone, regardless of who they are. And that for me is that, first and foremost, you're a human being who deserves to be treated with dignity, and then everything else follows.
Definitely, Maureen. And sorry, Angela, go on.
I don't know what your next question is going to be, but I just wanted to make a point that the Black, what does it mean to be Black and Irish? I always try and remind, especially white Irish people, that there is a lot of shared history and experience between Black and Irish folks, especially Black Americans. And I always encourage Irish people to look into that history, because, there were Black folks who were escaped slaves coming over to Ireland 100 plus years ago to advocate for Irish causes and Irish freedom. And we've had Black politicians and the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland was inspired by the Black civil rights movement in the United States. A lot of people don't know that. And so when we're talking about racism, when we're talking about Blackness, when we're talking about Irishness, look for those connecting points too, and see where we can learn how to have empathy for other groups of people. I'm namely talking about white Irish people having more empathy for Black folks, because we have shared history and shared experiences, and that shouldn't be discounted.
And on the point of shared history, many people don't know about Black Irish singers back in the 1700s, such as Raquel Baptiste, who was one of the most famous singers back in the 1700s in Ireland, or Tony Small, who fought in the Irish Revolution of 1798 rebellion. So there is Black people throughout Irish history who have contributed throughout Irish society. But for myself, when I ask myself what is the Black Irish identity or what it means to be Black and Irish, similar to what everyone has said, it's literally not either or, but it's just more and more. You know, growing up, I've always felt that I had to pick a side. I was a big footballer. Bonnie, you can play for Nigeria, you can play for Ireland. You know what I mean? But I think what our identity is, or what it means to be ourselves and our community, is just a whole mesh of everything. Yeah. And it's just amazing to feel a part of more than one thing. And it's something that I feel that we all need to be proud of. I know one of you want to get in there, but I am conscious that we do have about 5 minutes or so left. So I do want to hit this last question before we conclude, if that's okay, everyone. I do apologize. I want us to look into the future, basically. You know, we've spoken about our past, we've spoken about the present. Let's look at the future for our community, but also our island itself, you know. So the question I have for everyone is, you know, what are your future hopes for yourself? And what are your future hopes for the Isle of Ireland? Ope, do you want to go first?
For myself, because of the I do a podcast with my friends, and I'm also trying to just give back to the community in any way that I can. What I would hope is to somehow integrate myself to help the representation of Black people in the Irish media. You know, thankful for like the Black and Irish brand that has now popped up, Pints of Malt as well. I know you guys have been around for a while as well, similar to the same time as us. And it's just great to see all these different platforms popping up, because growing up, we didn't have this. And it's more looking at the younger generation for them to be like, oh, I can do it. I can do what I put my mind to. And it goes back to the theme of identity that Maureen touched on, that I don't want the younger generation to have to question or constantly question who they are. If they can see enough of who represents them in the media, it'll negate the questions or the questions that they'll ask. Who am I? Where do I fit in? Am I Black? Am I Irish? Am I in the middle? So for me, just to kind of wrap it up, my hope for the future, and we have seen representation. I can't think of her name now, but we do have a presenter that is in RTE now. I think one or two. One or two in RTE. I think there was one in Virgin Media as well. So we are breaking that cycle of having representation in media, in mainstream media, but I suppose just to kick it up a level, and where it's a more of a level playing field.
I was going to say media as well. That's really important. We have a lot more visibility, and I think that's great for the younger generations. I definitely could have used some of that as a kid, but also seeing Black people and other folks of color in positions of power, you know, actually making important decisions. That's where you work on like the diversity, inclusion, and equity piece, where we'll actually see it's not just a Black face in a commercial. Like, okay, what good does that do in long term? You know, really working towards something that's sustainable, so we have a more equitable society and culture for all people.
Yeah, I'm passionate about families, healthy families. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of broken Black families, a lot of children growing up with a lot of trauma from the home and outside the home. So I'm all about the inner healing work, doing that hard work to deal with that trauma. But for Ireland, my hope, and I'm in Northern Ireland now, so I have to realize that my hopes are quite different. I feel like Ireland, the south of Ireland is quite ahead compared to the north of Ireland when it comes to this discussion, when it comes to race. People up here are still quite closed, and you know, there's a lot of gaslighting. So I'm hoping that conversations can continue and people's eyes can be more open about the racial struggle. But yeah, that's my hope, that conversations can continue up here. We're also in the south of Ireland. the conversations had been going, and we've had bigger numbers of Black people. So I'm aware that I'm raising my children in a place that is quite a bit behind. But I'm doing that work of the family, working on my children's identity at home. So when they go outside, they're not gonna be caught off guard like I was.
I think literally everything everybody said is I completely agree with. I think there's a piece on education as well, where especially in schools, where like I think teachers and like people of influence really need to start sort of educating more students on, especially white students, on sort of the different cultures and understanding them, being more accepting and not yet letting their bias and sort of dealing with their bias as well, so it doesn't affect how the experience of a Black student. And one thing I wanted to say, I think this lady from South Africa who started in my work recently, she said like she's living up here now, and she said that like she feels invisible but also very visible. And I think like where like people don't really sort of care for Black people, but if there was something happened, the first person to come to sort of be pointed at would be the Black person. So I think I would love for us to get to a place where we don't feel like that. We don't feel like we have to sort of shrivel down in situations. And I want the next generation to feel very empowered to be like, go into any room, not have to think about their race, or not have to think about their hair, or not have to think about that they're going to be treated differently because they're Black. They're going to be treated the same as their white counterparts. So I think if we can get to a place where my children feel like that, and I think we'll be doing a good job. So yeah, those are my hopes for Ireland and for myself.
Brilliant stuff, Kenny. And I think for myself, just to wrap up on this, is that my hopes for myself would be just from me to continue to do what I can to support communities, to support our community, and to continue to push Ireland forward, to make it as the Isle of Ireland forward, to make it as welcoming and as equal for all of us as much as possible. My hope for the Isle of Ireland overall is that we continue to bring communities together. I'm a big believer in exposure and education. It's through exposure you get to learn about your neighbour, and through education you get to love your neighbour. So, or maybe I flip that around. It's through education you get to learn about your neighbour, but it's through exposure you get to love your neighbour. I think that makes more sense. but yeah, that's my hope for the future moving forward. I'm very, very confident that the Isle of Ireland has what it takes to get there and to be a shining example for the West and for the world overall. With that said, I'd like to once again give a special thank you to Maureen, Kenny, Angela and Opie for coming on today, and a special thank you to the West Belfast Festival for inviting us, Black and Irish, at this year's event. Look after yourselves, everyone, and much love.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.